Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Shelter Me from the Corriente Brothers series by Amy Briggs, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1. The water had receded, but Sagebrush Crossing was still wore its scars. Mateo Rivera guided his state-issued pickup through streets lined with debris, twisted metal siding, waterlogged furniture, and the skeletal remains of what had once been someone's front porch. The GPS on his dashboard had given up 2 miles back, but he didn't need directions to find the animal shelter. He just had to follow the sound of barking. A week ago, this had been a quiet Texas town where the biggest excitement was Friday night football and the annual Peach Festival. Now, it looked like a war zone. Mateo had seen plenty of disaster sites over the past 5 years, and each one presented its own unique challenges, but there was something deeply satisfying about showing up when communities needed help most, being part of the solution when everything seemed impossible. He slowed the truck as he passed what used to be Main Street. A red pickup sat nose down in what had been the creek bed, its rear wheels still spinning slowly in the current that refused to fully retreat. Someone had spray-painted Rover OK on the passenger door in bright orange letters, a small mercy in the midst of chaos. Hope Tail's Rescue sat on higher ground at the edge of town, occupying what had clearly been a working ranch before its conversion. The main building was a converted barn with fresh plywood patches where the flood had compromised the original siding. Someone had painted Hope Tail's Rescue in cheerful yellow letters across the front, but the paint was already peeling around the edges. Behind it, an older storage barn with weathered wood siding stood ready for overflow. Sandra had mentioned they used the loft space for supplies and emergency housing when needed. Mateo parked beside a mud-caked livestock trailer and stepped out into the humid morning air. The smell hit him immediately: wet earth, disinfectant, and the unmistakable musk of too many animals in too small a space. The cacophony was even more overwhelming than the scent. Dozens of dogs barked in overlapping chorus, punctuated by the sharper cries of cats and what sounded like a goat bleating somewhere in the mix. It was the symphony of displacement, of creatures torn from their familiar worlds and thrust into chaos they couldn't understand. He grabbed his medical kit and disaster response vest from the passenger seat, then paused to survey the scene. Volunteers moved between makeshift kennels, carrying water bowls and bags of kibble. Most looked exhausted, bone-deep tired that came from days of crisis management. A few glanced his way with curious expressions, but no one approached. They had that 1,000-yard stare that emergency workers developed after too many sleepless nights. Through the open doors of the converted barn, Mateo could see rows of crates and carriers, some stacked 3 high. 87 animals in a space designed for 42. Most of them already stressed from displacement, some probably dealing with medical issues that hadn't been properly addressed yet. If another deluge hit... You lost? The voice was crisp, professional, and carried just enough edge to suggest its owner didn't appreciate interruptions. Mateo turned to face a woman in her early 30s with auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and mud-stained clothes that spoke of hands-on work. She held herself with competent authority that came from years of handling crises, but there was something guarded in her dark green eyes, a wariness that went deeper than simple caution. Dr. Mateo Rivera, State Disaster Response Team, he offered his hand in his most reassuring smile. I'm here to assist with medical assessments and evacuation planning. She looked at his outstretched hand for a long moment before shaking it briefly. Liv Carter, and we're not evacuating. I'm not here to force evacuations. I'm here to help. The blue heeler at her side, probably Bandit, based on the description he'd received, growled low in his throat, clearly picking up on his owner's tension. Liv's hand dropped to rest on the dog's head, a gesture that seemed as much for her comfort as his. Help, she repeated the word like she was testing its taste. Right. And what specific assistance did the state send us this time? More forms to fill out? New regulations we can't possibly meet? Mateo understood her skepticism. He'd seen too many disaster responses where bureaucracy got in the way of actual assistance. Medical care for the animals, whatever you need. What I need is funding, additional kennels, and about 40 more hours in each day. Liv glanced back toward the barn where volunteers were conducting the morning feeding routine. What I definitely don't need is another state official with a clipboard telling me how I should be doing my job. No clipboard, Mateo said mildly, holding up his medical kit. Just this. For the first time, her expression softened slightly. Veterinarian? Emergency animal response. I go where the disasters are, help with medical care and evacuation coordination when needed. Well, Dr. Rivera, unless you brought a money tree or a magic solution for housing twice our licensed capacity, I'm not sure how much help you'll be able to provide. She was defensive, prickly, and clearly running on too little sleep and too much caffeine. But beneath the professional barriers, Mateo caught a glimpse of something that looked like desperation. This wasn't just about bureaucratic frustration. This was someone who'd been carrying too much responsibility for too long. Why don't you show me what you're dealing with? He suggested. I promise to keep my opinions to myself unless you ask for them. Liv studied his face for a long moment, clearly weighing her options. Behind them, one of the volunteers called out something about medication schedules, and the moment of decision passed. Fine, but we do this my way, and you don't slow us down. We've got animals that need care, and I don't have time for hand-holding. As she led him toward the main building, Mateo noticed the way she moved. Efficient, purposeful, but with an underlying tension that spoke of constant vigilance. Whatever had happened to make her so wary of accepting help, it had left deep marks. The first drops of rain began to fall as they reached the barn entrance, light and scattered, but carrying the promise of more to come. Through the open doors, you could see volunteers starting to move supplies under cover, their movements quick and efficient. They'd done this before. Somewhere in the building, weather radios crackled with updates that sounded increasingly ominous. As Mateo followed Liv into the controlled chaos of Hopetail's rescue, he couldn't shake the feeling that the approaching weather was going to test more than just their emergency preparedness.